Cell phones and vaping in public schools. Now, these are just a couple issues that are making it very difficult for schools to educate the children, to educate the babies. But these are issues that we've got to deal with and we got to learn to manage. Hey, I'm Brian Stevens, co-founder of K12, where our entire mission is to help public schools get and keep more children and educate them and hopefully create a really smart adults one day, right? So I just got back from New Jersey where I got the opportunity to train on Veterans Day. Happy Veterans Day, if nobody told you that. And I like training people on Veterans Day. I'm a vet, so it's kind of cool for me to go out there and train people that are in the security industry on Veterans Day. So that's what we got to do. We had about 50 officers with a particular school district, and they got to do role playing, and it was all about de-escalation strategies, how to handle conflict and disruption and really come out the other end better off, building a reputation for the school that makes people know you care and that you want to take care of the babies. So that's what we got into. But two particular issues I keep seeing across the United States. One is, how do we deal with cell phone? How do we deal with like vaping in the bathrooms and everything? Both things, there's so much science, and I think everyone gets it. Please don't make me dig into like the 8,000 pages of documentation on why it's distracting to have cell phones in school, and why it's distracting to allow kids to vape. I mean, I guess in the 50s and 60s it was smoking cigarettes, 70s and 80s smoking cigarettes, and now it's vaping, whatever. They're distractions for the purpose of education. I hope we all get that. If not, let me know, and I'll dig into that research for you if you need it to like justify why these things are not helping us educate the babies. But I found a video, and I want to kind of do a little bit of a reaction to this. And so let's deal with phones first, and then we'll deal with vaping. But I want to walk away with some fundamental strategies that school officials, school leaders, and parents for that matter, especially the parents, can do to help focus this and to stop with the distractions in schools. All right, so let's see what happened in this one.
This is what happened to a teacher who took away a student's phone. The student first pepper sprayed her teacher in the classroom before doing it again in the hallway as she...
Okay. You know, the sad part about this is I don't know if it surprises me that this young lady reacted with violence and assaulting. That's an assault. Well, it's a battery, technically. An assault's verbal and a battery is like a physical content. And she maced him in school property. So I don't know if she went to jail. She should have probably gone to jail. We've got two different blocks of issues that we've got to deal with. One is the lack of discipline that allows people to think that they can attack people physically when they don't get their way. Like, that's not for today. We're gonna try to jump into that in another day. But right now, it's what do schools need to do in order to like teach the children that they're not going to have their cell phones. They're not going to have unlimited access to them during a test or during class. It is distracting, right? But like, let's just talk about my own experience. I remember when my daughter was little and she has her friends around her and the moms and everything were very upset that some of the principals weren't doing things that they thought that they should be doing. Right or wrong, they didn't like it. And they wanted their children, my daughter, the other daughters, to record all their interactions they had with this particular principal. And, right or wrong, the moms were not going to have those phones be taken away from those kids. They just weren't going to do it in this case because they felt like there were threats and they wanted to record the information. And I would say that in public, in society, you're allowed to be recorded. You are allowed to record anybody. If it's in the open area, you can be recorded. If you're a police officer, security guard, yes, you can be recorded. And I actually encourage people to accept the recording because it can protect you and the person recorded all in the same time. It's just nice to have a little record, right, of everything. But there have to be some parameters in certain places. Work, schools, in order to accomplish the mission of what's being driven there. Now, this young lady, I didn't meet her, but I've talked to lots of children about cell phone use, and they think it's a right. And they also feel like they're being attacked. They feel like they're being attacked when their phones are being taken away from them. Isn't that kind of an interesting mix here where they felt like, I'm sure she probably would say, I'm defending my rights. Well, that kind of gets into the main issue here. We're not clear communicators. And yes, I am blaming the leaders. I'm telling you, school board, superintendents, parents, me, everybody. What we have to do first and foremost is set very clear standards on what we want and what the expectations are. And then we have to reinforce that over and over again. That's going to be kind of a theme of this conversation. But let's talk about what some other school districts are doing that has been effective. A little best practice research for you. So in Los Angeles, when it comes to phone usage, they have 420-something thousand students. So it's a big group, big city, and they banned cell phones and social media use throughout the entire school day, including during breaks and lunch periods. And the policy in general was aimed to reduce distractions and improve students. So we have a school district in 2024, so it's new. I don't know what all the outcomes of this are, but it's new. But they did it. They did it, and they have a ban. And Broward, which is down in Florida, which is another really large school district, they set out really clear policies that prohibit both the use and possession of cell phones throughout the school day. If a cell phones are brought onto school property, they must be turned off and stowed away. Exceptions, obviously, they have some exceptions that students that require learning accommodations and stuff, which I think is great. And even up in New York, one particular school, this is Bethlehem Central High School, implemented a cell phone ban that led to increased student engagement and reduced distraction. So there's your evidence, right? But what we're seeing throughout this are very clear policies and themes that the community has agreed with. So how do you need to do this? How do you need to get a clear policy? How do you need to get a clear theme? Well, the first thing, you better get community involvement. I don't think it's a great way to start out to be really dictatorial in this regard and just, you're the leader, you're a dictator, you're the school, and you're just going to say no cell phones, period. Because if the community at large, or a vast majority of them, are not on board with this, you're going to get a lot of pushback. And it's also, you're skipping a step. You're skipping a step. I used to always say that it's like, people like to have buy-in. They like to have their opinions heard. They like to have a say in the situation. And trust me, it's not going to go south if you ask the parents and the family and the community at large. I didn't say to ask the children. We're going to go back to Andy Griffith's show and the episode I talked about earlier, which is Opie and the Hobo, I think was called. Children are children. They need direction and guidance from adults until they become adults, right? So the older they are, the more independence, the more decisions and abilities to make the call they should have. The younger they are, the more confinement we should have. Children will walk out in the street. You have to teach them. The rules are, we don't walk out in the street without looking left and right. Without us teaching them that, they will walk out into the street. Okay, that's why we're here as adults. So I didn't say to go and ask the children for their opinions, right? But the community at large, parents, and all the other stakeholders, really vital. And simple, a survey can do it. A poll can do it. And you say, look, do you think that we should limit the use of cell phone? You can have a perimeter in there about the distracting effects. You can sell it a little bit. I think that's always good. But how limited do you think cell phones used to be? Because there's another district I have here. This was Manchester, where they didn't limit it entirely during the school day. They had breaks where they said, at lunch, you could be on your phones at lunch. In the mornings, you could be out right before class. In between classes, you could be on the phones. So they had use times for it, and it wasn't completely 100% no-go for that. I do think it's interesting. Music concerts. I was going to say music shows. Concerts and comedy clubs now have started to have these bags that people have to put their phones in, and they seal them up. That way they're focused on the show instead of doing that. So this is not just in schools, by the way. But so in some school districts, they're limiting the phones to set periods of time. In others, it's an all-out ban. And then in others, it's a total free-for-all or inconsistent policies and certainly inconsistent enforcement, right? So I think you got to get buy-in from the community. You've got to find out what the standards are of your community, and then that gives you all this freedom to implement and enforce a policy that the community agrees with. And if you can get, 65+%, that is a mandate. That's a mandate. You're never going to get over 85% of people. If you think you need 100% on this kind of stuff, you're never going to get it. And we do a lot of surveys and engagement research because, it's good to know where people are on certain issues. And if you ever get to 85% on anything, that's tantamount to 100% because there's it's somewhere between 9 to 11 in the population in any given community, by the way. They just hate everything. They're just against everything. It's really odd Or maybe it's just people being stubborn or cantankerous. But whatever it is, if you can get over 65% buy-in on a policy that you want, that is glorious. That's great. 70%, man, you run hard at it. Okay, so I think the first thing is to decide what you want to do. Go and poll it, go and research it, find out what the community wants, and then implement that policy. And then you've got to be consistent with how you do it. We're going to talk a little bit about discipline in a minute. So let's jump to vaping. The school security officers at the school district I just got back from were like, we walk in and they're always smoking in the bathroom and they scatter sight, they talk back and they get attitudes. And we're going to kind of talk about disciplinary issues, but I think it's first step is making sure that everyone understands the policy. All right, if vaping is barred on school grounds, it's barred on school grounds listen to me, for everyone, teachers and staff included. Now, this gets back to the cell phone policy. You can't have an inconsistent cell phone policy. If phones are distracting for the children, guess what? It's distracting for the adults too, right? So if you're going to say no cell phones in school, can the teachers have cell phones? Can the staff have cell phones? Can they use them during the middle of class? Like when the kids are taking a test, are they allowed to pull out their phones? That's called hypocrisy. You think the children don't see that? So if it's going to be a consistent policy, no vaping on school grounds, it's no vaping on school grounds for anyone. If it's no cell phones for anyone, I know they're adults and they're going to have, teachers are going to get upset and staff are going to get upset. That's why I think a more reasonable policy is critical. But you have to lead by example. You have to lead by example. I'm going to say it again. You have to lead by example. And so if everyone's allowed to sit in meetings at the place where people work at school and they are allowed to be distracted, and then you say just for this one group, you can't do it. Why can't they be on their cell phones? They can't be on their cell phones because it doesn't help the learning. Well, the teacher shouldn't be on the cell phone because it doesn't help with teaching. Now, but like on breaks, in between classes, sure, why not? Lunch, whatever. Whatever it is that you think you want. All right. But I just think consistency in policies is paramount to the success. Everyone has to live or breathe by the no vaping. And it's funny, we did some secret shopping. We do a lot of secret shopping in schools and it's to make them better. It's not just to throw stones at people. But like, hey, here's what looks weird to potential parents, staff, teachers. You can't get teachers to work there. Here's kind of what they're seeing. Here's what you can do better, right? And I remember I was meeting with the superintendent and the cabinet, the entire cabinet. And I said, look, one thing that we notice is the smoking areas on the school grounds need to be like moved somewhere not at the front of the building. Like they shouldn't be at where people are parking. They should be moved. And the superintendent goes, we don't allow smoking. I said, all right, you don't allow smoking. Great. But if you could have them move the smoking section to the back of these, but Brian, did you not hear me? We don't allow smoking. I go, I get it, man, but you're not enforcing that rule. So they're going to do it anyway. So why bother to have a rule if you're not going to enforce it consistently for everyone? Most of the laws, and don't forget I'm a lawyer and all this stuff, but laws with discrimination, sexism and all that really are a basis of treating groups differently. Treat groups the same, right? So if you're going to allow one school to have a smoking section because you're just not going to go out there and enforce it, well, you're being inconsistent and people don't like that stuff. People want to have consistent rules across the board. So superintendent, I said, well, if you're going to actually stop the smoking sections, you're not going to have smoking on school campus, then you got to end smoking on school campuses. I'm letting you know you had multiple schools out of the 60 that you had that people routinely had an area smoking. You could go down and look on the ground and see the cigarette butts. You could see the cigarette butts. I mean, it was every single day. They're just piling them up in the same spot. So don't act like you guys don't know this exists. You're inconsistent with your policies. And that is what's going to drive your teachers and your security guards and your front desk people nuts, where some people are allowed to do something and some people aren't. So I think that one, get community buy-in on what your policies are that you want. Number two, make sure it's consistent and reasonable for everybody. If the kids aren't allowed to vape in the bathrooms, no, neither are the teachers and the staff. I don't understand how people want to argue with them. Well, they're adults. Yeah, but they're here to train the babies. If you want to allow vaping on breaks, allow it on breaks. I don't care what your policy is. I just think it's got to be consistent. Have I beaten this? Have I beaten this enough? Should I move on? I'm gonna move on. I just get so worked up about this stuff because bad leadership just drives me crazy. Now look, for the vaping issues, there's tons of these like Catch My Breath programs. American Lung Association has vape school initiatives. There's a lot of initiatives, comprehensive tobacco-free policies through the World Health Organization. There's a ton of resources out there for the districts. The districts can dig into that, but let's talk about how to discipline them once you have a set policy. So let's assume that the policy is, hey man, no vaping on school grounds, or you can limit your cell phone use to in between class and at lunch, right? Okay, seems pretty reasonable, and everybody's got to kind of do that same thing. Well, I pulled out some research on healthy discipline strategies, and I think that this is kind of this first but's kind of a hodgepodge of a lot of different people's thoughts, but I think what you want to do is get buy-in for your community is, first off, you can't be afraid of discipline. I mean, let the community know that in the survey. Like, we're doing this because we're going to discipline. Now, discipline isn't punishment. I think all too often when we're disciplining a student, we're trying to punish them at the same time, right? Now, you can punish people for sure, but discipline first and then punish later. Isn't that kind of an interesting way to think about it, right? So it's tempting to treat your kids and the children as best friends, as buddies, but they're not. I mean, you're here to guide them. You're their leader. And when they say it's lonely at the top, what they mean is, for leaders, it's lonely because you cannot participate in the same things as all the people that you're leading, right? And so teachers, staff, parents, you're here to teach, to guide, and to make them awesome adults. You can be their friends when they're adults, right? But discipline is just enforcing the rules fairly and equally in order to help them get better. So one rule that I don't agree with is this like grounding and timeout type stuff, unless they're like little children, right? Timeout can be effective for little children. But when we isolate people and we make them have to sit around and think about what they did, it typically doesn't get them to change behavior. Neither does venting, by the way, like complaining. If you want to change action, you have to actually institute some sort of discipline that will cause a change. And sitting and thinking about all the ways that they messed up is not the way to do it. If it's vaping, getting them to write a paper on the negative effects on vaping and the toxicity that it can cause in their system, their lungs. Look, they probably know it, and you could tell them that all day long. All right, but the discipline is here's the actions. You vaped in the bathroom, now you got to write a paper. And the paper should be about something that make them like healthy. It shouldn't be like why you're bad. No. It's like, what are healthy ways to interact with your body, to make you feel awesome and be awesome, and how does vaping help or hurt with that? Topics like that. I mean, getting them to bake out what the positives are of where they should be going in life, and then the potential bad choices they're making. And frankly, it's the discipline how to write a paper. They need to learn how to write anyway. But sitting around like I had to do, I got detention. I got detention a lot. And we just sit there and screw off with our friends. Maybe we do a little bit of our homework, but it felt like punishment, and I didn't really learn anything from it. Other than, okay, I'm gonna have to waste an hour after school again if I, get in another fight, or I don't listen to the teacher, or whatever it is, right? And then it's very clear that in your policy, you've got to have very clear limits, and you have to be very specific on what the disciplinary actions are going to be. And this still goes in with community buy-in, right? And so it's funny how we think that we're very specific, but we're not. Like, hey, we catch you vaping again. Like if you choose, see, that's a different way to do it. The students are owning it. If you choose to vape on school property, the discipline number one is you're going to write a paper. The second discipline is you're gonna then present that paper, right? I mean, you can figure out some really clear standards, and then you can get into punishment later. Like, hey, man, we gotta do after school. We gotta suspend you. We gotta do all that kind of other stuff, man. But I think that discipline and creating good habits should be completely the focus first, and maybe second, right? And then this is kind of maybe you got to be positive, and this is why it's discipline, not punishment, because when you're punishing, you're not always being positive about the future. But what I mean by being positive is, instead of saying, no cell phones, instead say, hey, we're going to focus on learning today. No vaping. Hey, we're here to help you take care of your bodies. And so while you're here, we're going to help take care of your body. It's like the few hours that you're in school and you're with us, we're going to do this. Parents can make their own decisions about what happens at home. Absolutely. But once a policy, and it's a community policy, is set into position in your schools, then we get to be consistent about it. So, hey guys, we talked about you're vaping in the bathroom again. I don't want to argue. We're going to get to, you don't argue with it, but I'm here to help you take care of yourselves. This doesn't take care of yourselves. You guys are smart. It doesn't take care of you. Nice try. Now, come on, let's go. We're going to have to do some disciplinary structures. We're going to have to write a paper, whatever it is that you guys can come up with. And actually, there are lots of articles on ways to discipline versus punishment. I'll let you guys get into that. Or we can do it on your own if you want to comment, all right? The other thing is, don't engage. I mean, you're not having a debate. We're not going to go back and forth and have a conversation about this. You set it very clear. You communicate what the policies are. It's global, it's community-wide, and it's very powerful to let any of those 12% of the parents, that's 11% of the parents that don't care if their kids vape, they don't care if their kids are distracted in school, to let them know in large, the community does care. And they don't want to be outsiders. People as humans, we can dig into this later too, I guess. Humans don't want to be isolated. Humans generally want to be a part of the pack. They want to be a part of a community. And if you say the community standard is this, they're going to have a difficult time not falling in line with that. Trust me, it works. So you're going to communicate the standards. And when you're sick of communicating the standards, you're going to communicate them some more. And then you're going to have very clear standards on what happens, and you're just going to enforce it. But you're not going to argue about it. You're not going to go back and forth. We're like, why can't I do it? And you know what they're going to say. Well, you let Johnny do it. Johnny was doing it the other day. We're not doing that anymore. We're having consistent standards across the framework, right? All right. And then one thing that I got a great article by Dr. Gatos, Gaydos. And Dr. Gatos, I love what he says. You got to model good behavior. This is what I was getting into before. If the leaders, the teachers, the parents, and everybody else is going to sit around and vape, it's very hard for the kids not to see this. I mean, my mother, when I was little, smoked, but she had the smarts will say not to do it in front of me, right? She hid it. Okay, so we as adults can choose the kind of behaviors we want, but don't necessarily expose those in the school setting to the children. And I think that if we can form very clear community standards, we can communicate those standards over and over and over again, like until you're exhausted with doing it, set very clear disciplinary actions before punishment, right? And then treat everyone the same way. I think it's going to work out much better than what you've got now. And I didn't say it was perfect. And somebody's going to say, well, none of our parents care. No, they don't. And you don't know what they think because you haven't polled them. You don't know. You know what a couple parents think, but you don't know what the community thinks. Remember, get community buy-in, and it will help you enforce those disciplinary strategies. Thanks. I hope this helps. Bye.